The Transform Your Mind radio hour is a journey through the mind, offering fresh approaches to old problems that plague the African American woman and youth. Host Myrna Young, life coach, and Arifa Youssef, social worker, discuss topics such as relationships, depression, the single life, how to supercharge your marriage, poverty mindset, and more. Tune in every Wednesday at 5 p.m. and transform your mind to transform your life.
Welcome to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio hour and podcast. I'm your host, life coach Myrna Young, and in the co-host chairs today are Arifa Youssef Mortley, social worker and mental health counselor, and Dr. Trey Ahia, consultant psychologist. So excited that we finally got the three of us together. Welcome, ladies.
Yes.
Thanks for having us, Myrna. Nice to meet you.
Yes. Awesome. All right. And today we want to continue the conversation on women being abused and the connection to drug and alcohol addiction. We are looking at the stories in Dr. Ahia's book, which is called Call Me an Addict, The War on Women. And in her book, Dr. Ahia shares the story of three women on their addiction journey. We shared Kelly's story last week. And if you missed that episode, please download on your favorite podcast player. And today we are going to look at the second story in Call Me an Addict, Carmen's story. But before I share a summary of Carmen's story, I want to establish a connection between childhood sexual trauma and addiction. I'm just going to give you some statistics. Adults abused as children are reportedly 1.5 times more likely to say they used illicit drugs as compared to individuals who were not abused as children. The age of onset for non-experimental drug use with childhood sexual trauma survivors is around 14 years old. Studies also indicate that drug abuse is more common than alcohol use in adolescents who have been sexually abused. And researchers have determined that children with trauma may be at an increased risk of drug abuse because it helps them to cope or block out the traumatic memories, deal with feelings of isolation and loneliness, improve feelings of self-worth and self-esteem, and cope with mental health problems such as anxiety, depression, and PTSD. So this is where a mental health counselor can, talk about that a little later. All right, so I had quite a lot of responses to last week's episode when we shared Kelly's story. So
we were on fire.
Yeah, we were on fire. We had a dozen people comment on YouTube last night. It warmed my soul. So thank you for sharing.
All of those That's right.
Yeah, we're shouting out to everybody that listened and made some really great comments on YouTube. So it encouraged me to continue down this path. And so here's Carmen's story. Again, it's not as brutal as Kelly's story, but it's still very, very bad and worth sharing. So Carmen's story is a little different from Kelly's story in that her childhood abuse did not come from her parents. In fact, she said her father loved her and took her everywhere with him. But her brother started beating her up when she was very young because her father loved her more than him, and it wasn't actually his father, it was his stepfather. The beatings progressed to sexual abuse, and then, to top it off, her father's girlfriend, even though his father was married to her mom, he still had a girlfriend, made her eat her peach pie. So her brother jumped her into a gang, and she started breaking into people's homes, beating them up and robbing them, and then selling dope as part of the gang membership in her early teens. And then she was gang raped at 14, and that started her in the path of promiscuous. And soon after that, she ended up pregnant, and by 16, she had 2 children. She got the kids back to back. With no money to feed her kids, she started taking money from a drug dealer. He bought her a car, furnished her apartment, and spoiled her and her kids until he started beating on her on the regular and abusing her sexually. He even started pimping her out. She started getting high on crack to cope, and then crack turned into heroin. And, she spent several times in prison because, she was in a robbery and selling dope and things like that. And then her sister died, and she became seriously depressed. She said she got so tired of getting high that she tried to commit suicide 4 times. And her story ends with her 5th suicide attempt. So that is a synopsis of Carmen's story. So, Dr. Hia, let's hear from you now. I just want to understand, what made you choose Carmen's story to share, if you want to expand on her story.
Well, because it wasn't not only was her situation and her experience brought on by parents that really weren't involved. They subjected her to a brother that was upset with her. So there's another man in her life that was upset because she was favored. And so
right.
I thought that was pretty important to bring out to the readers, because so many times people talk about and they think about sibling rivalry. But then it can be taken a little bit further when you look at the relationship between the two, the age difference between the two, and that sort. And they lived in the same house.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a challenge for her. And being so young, what do you tell? Who do you tell? And what do you tell them? Right. My brother is what? So
right. Mm-hmm.
She really was in a rough spot there.
Okay. So that was the main focus, and that's what I said. I love that part, that the last one we talked about really bad parents, and drugs and alcohol and all that. And this time, loved by her, mother and father. But yeah, the brother was the issue here. And
right.
yes, and obviously, and then he got her into gang membership and all that kind of stuff. So yeah. Siblings, it can come from anywhere. And then, of course, she continued on the destructive path with men and the drugs and the prison and, all these different things. And then she's, right. So, okay. So, all right. Now, before I ask my second question, let me give a shout out to 2 of our sponsors today, Graphics GC and author Elisa Atkins. Have you ever wanted a professional logo design for cheap? Well, Graphics GC is your answer. We offer professional logo design for cheap. Check us out on Twitter at twitter.com/graphicgc. That handle again is twitter.com/graphicgc for all your logo designs. Have you been struggling with negative and self-defeating thoughts that are interrupting your daily life? Well, it's time for a mindset shift and life transformation. In her new book, Think Positive on Purpose, author Elisa Atkins inspires you to think on another level. She provides practical steps to using the power of positive thinking to overcome life's challenges and destructive thoughts. Start living a more peaceful and fulfilled life. Order your copy today on Amazon. Think Positive on Purpose by author Elisa Atkins. Awesome. Well, I want to thank our sponsors today. We'll hear some more from our sponsors on the break. Now, Dr. Trey, you mentioned in your first episode that most addicts can't just go into rehab and in 30 days get clean and never touch drugs again. In reality, it's a daily struggle, and most times they can't even stay clean for their kids. In your 30 years as an addiction therapist, what is the difference, do you think, between the ones who made it they were able to stay clean, and the ones that you said came back into the program and relapsed?
So it's not that an individual can't denotes not having the ability to. They have the ability to. But there are two primary issues that I've discovered through this 30 years, and one has to do with our physiological makeup, and the other has to do with our desire. So I just, as a person who would be an addict, I could lose a desire to use drugs, live this way, not have access to my family. I'm in the streets. I'm not clean. So I could literally lose the desire. I'm done with this. I don't want to live like this anymore. And then in layman's terms, our brains have a stop-and-go mechanism. And many times the stop-and-go mechanism for folks who have the addiction piece, their stop-and-go mechanism doesn't work. So, for example, individual who has a faulty stop-and-go mechanism in their brain can get all this good information, leave the rehab. They might see drugs, they might be around the environment that they used to visit when they were in the streets running for that drug, and they cannot stop. So they will continue to use the drugs, maybe after 1 year, 6 months, 3 years of clean time, because they have a faulty stop-and-go mechanism. And so researchers have looked at that, and they found that has been the case in many individuals. Hence, we see the use of things like Suboxone that helps folks to not have the cravings anymore. So researchers are working on that, but primarily I found that those are two major reasons why individuals struggle with this, whether it's crack or marijuana or heroin, which is even worse than all of them.
Yeah, well, that's good. I'm going to share a story of my experience with someone on crack, and that's exactly. I like the fact that you say that it's the faulty stop and go mechanism. And so that is, yes. I'm going to talk about my story in the second half, but for now, let's bring on our mental health counselor onto the story. Now I can't even speak. Right. Now, Arifa is going to bring on the perspective of youth, because that is basically her market. So, Arifa, as a mental health counselor, what do you think is the reason youth with sexual abuse and other trauma medicate with drugs? Is it different from what I mentioned earlier as we started on?
I would say a lot of what you mentioned earlier actually resonates with young people that I work with as well, in my experience. And I would also add on to say that in my experience, like young people, with sexual abuse or other traumatic experiences that are living with addictions, they often use drugs for a variety of reasons on top of the list. So like as an example, I could say they often use drugs to feel, a sense to be more confident about themselves, especially when they feel like they're not in control of their situations from the past, and they want to build up their own self-esteem in their own way. I'd also say they make a lot of impulsive decisions, and sometimes some of those decisions, because they're not thinking through it, it leads to a lot of consequences, which sometimes leads to like risky activities such as using drugs or other behaviors, and which in the moment I feel makes them feel more important or more powerful, or makes them feel like they can socialize with people and not feel as isolated. Okay. And I'd also say that in that feeling, like helping them, it may also help them feel in the moment like they can relax. So a lot of young people, I know, they're trying to escape things, they're trying to stay on the go, keep their mind busy on something else so they don't focus on the situations that they've been through. And so in that, they're usually very anxious,
Right.
And so sometimes they'll tell me, like, using, drugs, it kind of, in that moment, makes them feel relaxed, makes them, puts them in another space, in another world, which for them is a coping strategy, right?
Right.
It's a coping strategy for them. So the escapism among youth, it's very real. Many of them, they feel like in that moment, things feel better. Their problems in the moment, it's gone away. It seems like, doesn't seem as real or important, whatever they've been through. And the best way for me to explain it is I'm a very visual person. So when I sit down with young people, I want to understand from their point, like, what is it in that moment? Like, what does it look like for them? And so in a lot of those situations, what we've come up with is it's almost like watching a movie. So it's like, remember Narnia? The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's a great example.
I don't have young kids.
I'm a visual person. I told you this. But it's like, when you sit down and you see the children, they're isolated, they're alone, and they end up in the closet, they go into a whole new world, and in that world they want to stay there because it's safe, it's fun, it's exciting, We know this isn't real. But when you read the book, it feels so real. And I think with a lot of young people, they find themselves in a situation where it's like, I want to escape from my reality, from my pain. And drugs is one of those ways that they're able to do that. And drugs is also another way to escape from some of the underlying, signs and symptoms related to the mental health that's in relation to their trauma. And so I have a young person I work with, and he's been through a lot of trauma in his life, being like abused, even within the education system, people not knowing how to handle him, and his diagnosis of he was diagnosed with ADHD and diagnosed with bipolar, and then he started using crack cocaine at 14, right? So when I was talking with him, he said to me, I started using because I didn't understand, I was always busy. No one was paying me any attention. There was a lot going on in my head. And the drugs were just kind of in the moment, they were calming me down. And then I felt like I could function more normal, quote unquote normal, when I was on these drugs.
Well, crack is the worst thing for him to start with, because apparently you never stop when you start that one.
It's the most addictive, right?
It's the most addictive.
Yeah, it's the most addictive. So
not really most addictive. You have to think there's a physiological and there's a psychological addiction. So those physiological addictive drugs like heroin or opiates, they can be the most challenging. They can be the most challenging. Whereas the amphetamine-based, the cocaine, the crack, they tend to be more psychologically addictive. So when people talk about what's the most addictive, I always try to get them to separate the two and talk about it from that perspective.
Well, people that have not been in your space just hear what we hear on the street. I've heard that crack is one of those things that the second time you take it, you're addicted, or some, ridiculous thing like that. And in the cocaine form, you have people taking that for years and never really get addicted. They're functional. So that's what I heard. But obviously, you being, a psychologist and working in the field, you know the difference. But I just want to circle back to what Arifa just said about coping, and is that I was listening to a podcast the other day where the guy was talking about his alcoholic anyway, he was talking about being an alcoholic, and he started from when he was very young as well. He's 6 years clean now, but basically what he was saying is that he would when he would drink alcohol, then when he was in a party, then it made him be able to be sociable. And without the alcohol, he couldn't. He was like a hot mess. So I understand where you're talking about the kids, that take drugs and they take it so that they can fit in or, be comfortable and things like that. So, yep, I understand. Awesome. All right. Well, we're going to take our first break. We're going to hear messages from our sponsors, Ducky Mays, author Kimberly Bussey Lewis, author Sheila Fields and Kids Tasks. And when we come back, we're going to look at how crack cocaine became one of the addictive drugs. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Visit our exciting adventure club at www.duckymaze.com. Pinky and Todd will be waiting there for you with their entertaining adventures, as well as their home and garden merchandises for you to view. Enjoy our amazing home and garden website at www.duckymaze.com.
Kid Tasks, an application of good deeds, now available on Google Apps. Kid Tasks is an organizer for your children's daily routine, but it is good for the entire family. This is how it works. Parents, create a list of tasks. It could be as simple as feed your pet, brush your teeth, water the plants, do the dishes, etc. Parents, you can even rate each task in points. Family members do the tasks on the list and they get points. Parents, you can even set your own exchange rate. Example, 1 point may be equal to $1, more or less. Now, having collected a certain amount of points, the kids may ask their parents for their salary for their work. How cool! Why this app is useful for parents? Because it will help to give kids a sense of responsibility and prepare them for the things they need to do when they become older. Why is this app helpful for children? Because children will be rewarded when they help out with chores around the house. They will have the opportunity to earn a salary or pocket money in exchange for working on their tasks. To download this app, head over to Google Apps and search for Kid Tasks. That's KIDTASKS. You can also click the link on my blog to head over to Google Apps. My blog can be found at blog.myhelps.us. Don't wait until sexual temptation attacks you before you see it as a formidable force which seeks to destroy you. Its insidious tactic is designed to enslave you into sexual sin and keep you locked in erotic desires. How you perceive sexual temptation in your life determines how well you will overcome its deceitful force and walk in total victory. Naked and Ashamed, The Battle of Sexual Temptation is a Christian self-help book that explains what sexual temptation is and gives you biblical scriptures on how to control your sexual desires and unnatural urges. Readers will learn how to refrain from overreacting and falling into sexual bondage. So, put on your seatbelt and get ready to be free from all your unwanted sexual desires and temptations. Order Naked and Ashamed, The Battle of Sexual Temptation today. written by Sheila Fields. Now available on Amazon.
Have you ever wished that you had the information to elevate the conversation at work on how to build a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion? Well, now you do, with my newly published book, A Seat at the Table or Part of the Meal by Kimberly Bussey Lewis. This book will give you examples of intentional efforts that level the playing field and yield dividends for your career and your company. The book can be found on Amazon, A Seat at the Table or A Part of the Meal by Kimberly Bussey Lewis, or on www.motivationalmuse.com. So get your copy today and get your seat at the table.
Welcome back to Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio hour and podcast. I'm your host, life coach Myrna Young, and in the co-host chair today is mental health counselor and social worker Arifa Youssef Mortley and consultant psychologist Dr. Trey Ahia. And we are looking at Dr. Ahia's book, Call Me an Addict, A War on Women. Specifically today, we are talking on the topic childhood sexual trauma and addiction. We have linked the connection to childhood sexual trauma and addiction. So I gave some statistics in the early segment. Dr. Ahia talked about, why she wanted to share Carmen's story, and Arifa gave us some examples of why the youth with trauma, other than, coping skills, also get into substance abuse. Now, at the end of our last segment, we opened up on crack cocaine. Now, because that was Carmen's drug of choice. And, I mentioned that I always thought that crack cocaine was the most addictive, and I have a personal experience that I'm going to share in a minute of my encounter with someone on that drug, and that was basically my take from it. But Dr. Ahia, you said something just as we finished the last segment that crack cocaine is a psychological drug and the other one is emotional or whatever. You want to dive into that a little bit more deeply?
So just so the audience kind of gets an idea about this thing called crack, the makers use coca leaves as an intoxicant, and that dates back 300 years. So this is nothing new. People say, oh, it's new. It's not new. Crack cocaine is a crystallized form of cocaine, which was developed in the 1970s. So people kind of get a sense of that. What's interesting to me about this thing called crack, it was initially created so from the powder form to the crack form to make more money. The drug dealers needed more money. And so they made this little thing called crack, and they broke it into chunks, they cooked it, and that sort. So the biggest surge of this crack epidemic began between 1984 and 1990. Picture that. So by the end of that time, it was available in 28 states and the District of Columbia. A year later, it was available in all states in the United States except for 4. That's amazing, right? Okay.
Yeah, I know, right.
So when we think about the physiological components of a drug and how it affects that, we're talking about our hormones, we're talking about the chemicals in our bodies, right, that affect us. If I don't have this substance, I get sick, quote unquote. You hear a lot of people from opioids, heroin, I need to get better, I need to get well. Right. So they go get their fix. Whereas if I'm a crack addict or cocaine, psychologically, or marijuana, I think I need it. I think I do. If I don't have it, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to go into the sweats per se. Whereas a heroin or opioid, a person who has
they need it, right?
They literally, their body literally, they need it. Otherwise, they start to throw up. They have sweats, diarrhea.
Yeah, and they're in a lot of pain, too. Yep.
Oh, my goodness. It's amazing. So that's what I meant by, yes.
Okay.
Psychological versus physiological.
Right. Okay. I got you. And you know something? That was very, that clicked into, me from what I know of the drug. Because like I said, crack is one of the drugs that I actually researched. And I'm going to tell you my story now. I I met this guy, and on our second date, we were sitting in a car, and he casually mentioned to me that he is a recovering crack addict. And he was addicted for 20 years, and then he said he was clean. Now, I never had experience with anyone that's addicted to drugs, crack, cocaine, whatever, so I took his word at face value, Needless to say, you all know what's coming next. He was not over crack, right? So because of the fact that, I'm this type of woman, that his mother kept saying, he needed a strong woman in his life, and you're going to be this strong woman, and they put all this stuff on me, and I'm thinking, I said, hey, I'm Superwoman. I take that thing. So I thought that I could help. So I started doing all these research. Right.
As opposed to him being a strong man, but go ahead.
I know. That's exactly what his mother said. They need a strong woman. And me, I took that mantle. I like being called a strong woman. So I started, researching the drug, trying to figure out what kind of food I can give him to eat. That type of stuff. Yeah. I know, right? And then
I'm thinking, I wish I was around this time.
What was that?
No, I'm saying I'm listening to you, and I'm like, wow, I wish I was around these times.
I know. It's really funny that you should say that, though. But Kevin, my son, actually knew this person because Kevin was living with me at the time over here in Miami. But anyway. So, I'm trying to be this person that can help him, not become a crack addict. But what I found when I did research was that crack makes a permanent change to your brain, and you can never actually not become a crack addict because it's permanent. It's irreversible in that you always get these urges. So this is what happened. He said he was clean. I'm not sure how long he was clean, if he was lying or what. But I had a limousine service, and he became my driver. And one night, somebody was smoking in the back seat of the limousine, because that's what they do, right? They rent a limousine, they do their whatever. And just that smell of crack sent him into a tizzy. He dropped off the people, took the money, I don't know, $500 or whatever it was for the night, and he disappeared for 4 days. I had to report my limousine stolen.
Of course.
And he didn't come back until every bit of that money was finished.
Yeah.
And after that, he was back to being a crack addict. He would work, right? Because he was one of these binge addicts. I mean, he didn't take it every day. I don't know if people take it every day, but he would binge, finish all his money, gone for 4 days or whatever, and then come back. So he got a job, and when those people paid him, sometimes you get a paycheck like a 2 in the afternoon or something.
Right.
He would leave immediately with that money. and go and get his fix, binge, gone until the entire money was finished. And his mom would go and take him out of these houses, and I mean, she was there walking behind him and picking him out of these crack things or whatever. But in the end, of course, we broke up, and shout out to the Salvation Army program. He went into the Salvation Army program for a year, and I don't know if he ever relapsed after that, but it did a good job that it kept him out of it for a while, because the Salvation Army program, I understand, is a pretty strong program, and of course they went through this, bit of spirituality and all that, because a lot of times you need God in the mix. You need the spirituality or whatever. Anything you want to say on that?
Well, when you started out, you talked about the effect that it has on the brain. You were talking about that. Mm-hmm. So the thing is that cocaine or crack damages the brain structures, and that's what can trigger the addiction. You see, that's what they were telling you. And so this particular disease involves reward circuits and our dopamine system. You see? So abusing a drug as potent as crack can cause, of course, other kinds of long-term damage as well. And we know that a lot of people who come down off of it, they have their serious depression. So the brain doesn't reach its original equilibrium. And then the person struggles with the cocaine abuse and trying to get that back again. And then they're stuck. A lot of people are stuck battling permanent depression.
Yeah, that's what Carmen did. That's why she committed all those suicide, right? Yeah, right, yeah. So that's my story. Thank goodness it's the only one. So Aretha, let's get you in the conversation. Do you offer any kind of addiction counseling in your youth programs? And if so, what do you concentrate on?
So like in our organization and our programs, to be honest, we don't focus so much on the addiction counseling piece, and we mostly focus on, like, we'll do the intake for young people when they're entering into program to kind of see where they're at, or sometimes they get referrals in where their social worker or their psychologist or even their parole officer will give us information sharing, like, these are some of the challenges that they're encountering in their life. And so with that information, because as you know, like with us, we're all about like the self-determination piece and the stages of change model. So we can't like say to someone, hey, like I heard all this stuff about you and you have to go get treatment. Because, usually you'll get the nice pleasantry words, right? Around that. Since we're on air, we can't say those words, right? So, so usually what we'll do is we'll provide information in general to like parents, even some of the young people in our program. We give them the whole mental health, training if they want it, but we also provide a lot of information around substance abuse. We provide information around what services are available, so we often do a lot of referrals to services for young people that are living with addictions, but those are the ones that are like, I'm ready to seek help. So they're in that stage where they're contemplating and now they're ready to say, hey, you know what, I think I have an issue and I wanna get help for that. And so in that instance, we usually do the referral piece for them. Some of us will go in with them just because it's overwhelming for them to go by themselves sometimes. So we'll have somebody go to support them. And sit down with them until they're able to see somebody. But most of our clients are more interested in focusing on their mental health and not their addiction, which is interesting because obviously it's like they're linked together, right? The mental health problems and the addictions. But it's easier for a lot of the young people that we deal with to say, hey, you know what, I'm living with PTSD or I'm living with depression. But when it comes to like dealing with like opiates or, crack cocaine, they won't talk about it in terms of thinking they have an addiction. Okay. They'll say, oh, miss, as an example, Molly, right? Or Percocets. It's like one time, I'll give you a story, actually. One time we went to an event, and because our youth, some of them are entrepreneurs, and they'll have events, and sometimes the team will go out to support them so they see, hey, you're not alone. Like, people are really interested in the fact you're taking these steps or these strides towards, pursuing something that's legal. Because a lot of the young people we work with are coming out of the justice system. So one time we went to support one of the young people. So a lot of the other young people were like, hey, we're going to go to support this young man as well. And so we're all sitting down at the table. The older youth are talking, they're socializing. And then one's like, hey, yo, do you have a Percocet? And I'm just like, but not to me, like to a next person. Oh yeah, how many do you need? And they just pull it out of their pocket. And he's like, oh, how much? Oh, $5 for each. Okay, cool. Like I'm gonna take like 5 of those.
Drug dealing right at your table.
And I'm sitting there like, oh my God, this is happening. This is like a normal flex, right? It's normal.
Nobody thinks anything of it. That's why they don't even do it in secret. Yep.
No, because it's for them. What I've realized is it's a normal thing. Because one of them turned and said, "Miss, have you ever had Molly?" I was like, "Well, no." You know, and they're like, "You should try it. It'll loosen you up." You're like, "You should try it. It'll loosen you up." You know, they're like Molly Percocet. You know, they start singing and stuff. You know, they're like Molly Percocet. And I'm just like sitting there, and that was the moment that my team and I realized they don't even see this really as a drug. It's just like they see it as just like me drinking orange juice in the morning.
Yep.
You know, like they'll say, "Miss, like I need a Percocet just to kind of, you know, get me hyped for the day."
What do you say, Dr. Trey? I don't even know what it is.
That thought makes it easier because it's in pill form.
Right. Yes.
Okay. What does it do?
Yeah.
Like
and it's really interesting because even when you listen to the history of like a lot of these drugs, like these are drugs that are prescribed from a doctor, right? So for them, it's like I'm not really doing anything wrong.
Okay.
Because, or some of them are like, well, my doctor prescribed this to me, and you know, I had back pain from construction. But you're like, but your back pain is gone now, right? Like, what's going on? But anyway, so that's like my story around that, just to show like how no it's become. But with our program, usually what I like to get back to what I was saying. The young person, like I said, they don't identify most of the time that they have an addiction issue. They're more focused around their mental health. So usually in a program, what we try to do is we try to get them to focus around things that are going on in their life, a lot of their challenges, so they can identify it, and then their risk factors. And then we'll usually, you know, subliminally talk about use and, like, you know, tie it in to say, you know, a lot of young people that are going through similar things, sometimes the way that they try to cope or maneuver through the day is by doing X, Y, and Z. Okay. And so that's for them that aha moment where they get quiet usually. They get quiet and they're just like, oh, yeah, like I smoke an ounce a day, or, you know, like I drink a 40. So then I'll be like, so then we'll talk to them around, oh, did you notice like when you're usually doing this? And it'll be like, oh, you know, when I hear sirens, or, you know, I saw a police car and these things triggered moments in my life when certain things happened to me. And so we try to get them to understand how the two are connected. And then usually at some point we'll find they might shift in the stages of change, where sometimes we'll have young people say, hey, you know what, I feel like I do have an issue and I need help. And in that instance, that's when we refer out, because there's a lot of programs that have the capacity to support a young person, because it's really challenging, especially talking about relapse. We have young people that are like, I'm never going to change. I'm always going to be an addict, right? And they have that mentality where it's like, why should I go to treatment? I saw a counselor. I went to treatment. I relapsed like 3 days later. I've been to rehab 3 times. I'm still relapsing. This is going to be my life. And so that's a challenge we often face. And our team, we're very honest in saying, man, do we have the capacity to support young people that may be coming back like 7 to 8 times? Like, we don't do like inpatient, outpatient care, right? So often that's why we do the referral.
Because, got you. I want to get this question to Dr. Trey before we go on our second break. So yeah, great response on that. I like your story on the Percocets and the Mollies and whatever. But Dr. Trey, in the world of crack, cocaine, there's, you know, a word. It's not a nice word, but it's the women are sometimes called crack whores, and they prostitute for drugs. And Carmen was no different. She was doing the same thing. But the question I want to ask you, it is really interesting that the men who are addicted to crack still abuse women that are addicted to crack, because, you know, the women go and, you know, prostitute themselves out for the drug, and even the guys that are addicted, use them for that. So I thought there was a perfect segue to talk about war and women, and if you wanted to, to have support that with a comment.
Yeah, well, it just goes to show you how there's women living. It's a double standard world for women. Men do the same thing on the street. I need to get high, so I'm going to go and have sex with someone. And these casual sexual affairs are not looked at as the same as women are. In this world. So
they're called crack whores. I don't know. There's no word for the men, right?
No word for the men. I haven't heard one.
Right. Okay.
You can't give it up, but you can. Oh.
Right.
Yeah, let's take a look at that.
Right.
So that's the unfortunate piece to all of that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. That's all right. Well, listen. Let's take our second break. And when we come back, we are going to look at some symptoms that parents can look for, to know if their children are being abused, if they don't know. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Visit our exciting adventure club at www.duckymaze.com. Pinky and Todd will be waiting there for you with their entertaining adventures, as well as their home and garden merchandises for you to view. Enjoy our amazing home and garden website at www.duckymaze.com.
Kid Tasks, an application of good deeds, now available on Google Apps. Kid Tasks is an organizer for your children's daily routine, but it is good for the entire family. This is how it works. Parents, create a list of tasks. It could be as simple as feed your pet, brush your teeth, water the plants, do the dishes, etc. Parents, you can even rate each task in points. Family members do the tasks on the list and they get points. Parents, you can even set your own exchange rate. Example, 1 point may be equal to $1, more or less. Now, having collected a certain amount of points, the kids may ask their parents for their salary for their work. How cool. Why this app is useful for parents? Because it will help to give kids a sense of responsibility and prepare them for the things they need to do when they become older. Why is this app helpful for children? Because children will be rewarded when they help out with chores around the house. They will have the opportunity to earn a salary or pocket money in exchange for working on their tasks. To download this app, head over to Google Apps and search for Kid Tasks. That's KIDTASKS. You can also click the link on my blog to head over to Google Apps. My blog can be found at blog.myhelps.us. Don't wait until sexual temptation attacks you before you see it as a formidable force which seeks to destroy you. Its insidious tactic is designed to enslave you into sexual sin and keep you locked in erotic desires. How you perceive sexual temptation in your life determines how well you will overcome its deceitful force and walk in total victory. Naked and Ashamed, The Battle of Sexual Temptation, is a Christian self-help book that explains what sexual temptation is and gives you biblical scriptures on how to control your sexual desires and unnatural urges. Readers will learn how to refrain from overreacting and falling into sexual bondage. So, put on your seatbelt and get ready to be free from all your unwanted sexual desires and temptations. Order Naked and Ashamed, The Battle of Sexual Temptation today. Written by Sheila Fields. Now available on Amazon.
Have you ever wished that you had the information to elevate the conversation at work on how to build a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion? Well, now you do. With my newly published book, A Seat at the Table or Part of the Meal by Kimberly Bussey Lewis. This book will give you examples of intentional efforts that level the playing field and yield dividends for your career and your company. The book can be found on Amazon, A Seat at the Table or A Part of the Meal by Kimberly Bussey Lewis, or on www.motivationalmuse.com. So get your copy today and get your seat at the table.
Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio hour and podcast. I'm your host, Life Coach Myrna Young, and in the co-host chair today is Dr. Trey Ahia and Arifa Youssef, social worker and mental health counselor. All right, I'm not going to go into what we talked about the second half because we are running out of time and I need some content that I need to get in. So I'm just going to say that we are trying today to bridge the gap between childhood sexual trauma and addiction. So I want to give you some statistics here. Most children who suffer abuse simply fail to recognize, acknowledge, and effectively process trauma until it manifests in self-destructive ways like self-harm, substance abuse, or the inability to control their emotions. Both males and females can be affected by child sexual abuse. The prevalent rate is higher for females, though. It is estimated that nearly 15 million adolescent girls worldwide have experienced forced sex, according to UNICEF. And data from the Department of Health and Human Services indicates that almost 60,000 children are sexually abused per year in the United States. The Department of Justice reports also that 14% of all men, and listen to this number, 36% of all women in prison were abused as children. So, we know, I've always heard, and people sometimes say that it's a bunch of crock, but it's very true. Your childhood is basically your foundation for your entire life. I mean, sometimes you have a good childhood and you still turn out bad, but almost 90% of the time when you have a bad childhood, there are certain things that's going to affect you unless you live consciously and actually try to make a difference instead of going with the flow. So here are some symptoms of sexual abuse: withdrawal and mistrust of adults, suicidality, difficulty relating to others except in sexual or seductive ways, unusual interest in or avoidance of all things sexual or physical, sleep problems, nightmares, fears going to bed, frequent accidents or self-injurious behaviors, refusal to go to school or to the doctor or home, secretiveness or unusual aggressiveness, neurotic reactions, obsessions, compulsiveness, phobias, habit disorders like biting and rocking, unusual sexual knowledge or behavior, prostitution, forcing sexual acts on other children. You see somebody do it to you, you do it to someone else, and extreme fear of being touched. So, as we wrap up our show, I want to ask Dr. Trey and Arifa two last questions. So, Arifa, how do you give hope to the youth who are starting their adult lives with sexually abused trauma? And keep it brief.
Okay. I feel like to keep it brief, I always start off with just letting
4 minutes left, right?
Yeah, I really just let people know that they're not alone, because I think that's the most important thing, to know that you're not alone and that other people have experienced abuse as well, and it's never too late to find help. And then just connecting them with others who care about them or support them as early as possible so that they can begin to learn how to navigate through their lives and help them heal.
Perfect. That was brief. Thank you.
It was.
I had more, but, I kept it brief.
That's right.
I kept it brief, 4 minutes.
She did. All right, Dr. Trey. I like the subtitle of your book, which is called War and Women. So what do you want to say on that? So how do we as women can do something to stop the war on women?
So there's one word, control.
Okay.
A lot of times women or people, especially women, don't understand the only person I can control is myself. I can say no when you tell me to lay down and do X, Y, Z. I can say no and leave to go to safety. So being able to control oneself and accept that power, that's the key. I accept that I can control me. No one else. I love him. I love her. I'm in love. You can love them from around the corner and be safe.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, it's always been my mantra, personal power. Because if you don't have personal power, then your life is, down the drain, to be quite honest. Mm-hmm. But yeah, these women give away their power,
Yeah.
Carmen stayed with, the guy that was abusing her for 8 years because she figured she couldn't leave and she didn't have money. Yeah, but you can always leave, So
yeah.
that's an excellent way to end our show on a nice positive note that anyone that's listening, you do have the power. It's just fear that's really keeping you because you think that if you leave, you can't support yourself, or if you leave this or what. But so it's going to be uncomfortable for a little bit, but you're going to be much better off in the long term, right, than having someone abuse your body and your mind and all the other things that they abuse. Children is a different story. But the women that we're talking about, yes, you have the power to say no, and you have the power to leave, and you have the power to live the life that you were designed to live. All right, ladies, this was an exciting show. I love the way we meshed together. We did well. Loved it.
We're powerful women.
That's right. Loved it. So I want to thank our listeners for staying with us until the end. Please show your support by posting a review on iTunes and subscribing to the podcast. If you have any topics that you would like Arifa, myself, or Dr. Trey to cover, you can send me an email at info@myhelps.us. You listeners are invited to join my private Facebook group called Life Coach. To reach Dr. Trey Ahia, you can contact her on the web at www.forlifeservices.cc.com. -cc.com. Did I not say that? I said dash.
No, you didn't. No, you
okay,
didn't.
All right. Let's do it again. It's forlifeservices-cc.com.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Right, yes. And to reach Arifa, you can contact her on the web at www.liftedbypurpose.com. If you would like a transcript, all right. Did I say yours wrong too?
No, you actually said it right. You see what that CC did to me? No, you're right. You're right, Myrna. It was me.
I just had a little blip. I mean, I got to know yours by now.
You're good.
That's right. To read a transcript of this interview, head over to blog.myhealth.us. You will also find links there to Lifted by Purpose, Dr. Ahia's website, and the sponsors for this episode. All right. So any last words, ladies, before I say goodbye?
Hey, I'd like to thank everybody for continually listening and supporting the show. We'll see you next week.
Yes.
See you next week.
Yes. All right. Well, listen, I hope that you guys were inspired, learned a few things about drug addiction and the link to childhood trauma. Remember to share the show to anyone that you think that might be able to pick up a few nuggets regarding drug addiction. So thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, namaste.